Good morning, everyone. I'm Steve Rosansky, President and CEO of the Newport Beach Chamber of Commerce, and I want to welcome you to our May edition of Wake Up Newport. We've got a great program set up for you today. A great speaker. We've had him before in person. I wish we were back in person already so we could see him again. I'd love to make him fly down from, I think you live up in Sacramento, or last I remember, or at least his office is probably up there, but it's a powerful feeling when you can make powerful men fly all around the state, to do things for you. So, but we're happy to have him on Zoom. I'm going to introduce our sponsor here in just a second. I just do want to remind everybody that we're going to have the presentation. If you have any questions, make sure you put them in the Q&A box, and we'll be getting to them towards the midpoint of our hour this morning. So with no further ado, I'd like to introduce Tyler Parker. He's going to need to unmute himself, and he's going to tell us a little bit about what's going on over at Republic Bank this month. So take it away, Tyler.
Perfect, Steve. Thank you so much. Good morning, Newport. This is Tyler Parker with First Republic Bank out of the Newport Beach location on MacArthur. Really just wanted to give everybody an opportunity to learn a little bit more about what we do as a bank. As a reminder, we are a private bank headquartered out of San Francisco. We've got a pretty big presence in San Francisco, Los Angeles, San Diego, and 2 office locations here in Newport Beach and Corona Del Mar. As far as Orange County is concerned, I am going to go ahead and share a slide to give a little bit more information on what it is that we actually do as a bank. So bear with me just a quick moment here. Okay, so we're going to do this. So First Republic, like I mentioned, is a client-focused private bank. You can see here that this wheel here is what I'm wanting to bring attention to. This is the client at the center of everything that we do, and we have many different arms of First Republic Bank. Specifically, we have consumer business, and then we also have wealth management. We also offer trust services. And one of the questions that we get regularly is kind of where did we start? And each of these different arms of First Republic Bank came out of a distinct client need. We focused on originally jumbo lending back when we were originated. We found a really great niche there, and our clients continued to ask more of us. So what you see here is we are full service. We do financial planning, investment management, brokerage services, trust services, insurance services, foreign exchange, business banking, the usual checking, savings, CDs, deposits, commercial real estate lending, personal lending. We've got a great personal line of credit program, and also residential lending. Everything that we do is really focused around what our clients need from us, what they continue to ask from us. And when there's an opportunity to meet those needs, then First Republic will investigate and see if we can move forward potentially on it. Steve, I promise I will keep that short and concise, and that's really it. What we are is about service to our client, with you at the center of everything that we do.
Great, thank you, Tyler. Clearly, you guys have the full spectrum of services there. Just quickly, where are interest rates headed these days, this week?
Oh, I wish I could give you the crystal ball view on that. We're very, very competitive. We underwrite a little bit differently than some other organizations. And so everything that we do in terms of interest rate is really relationship based. Looking at what we can potentially do to help you out. So we don't look at buy downs or anything like that. We have a very specific process to give very competitive rates in the market.
Okay, well, my prediction is rates are headed up, so get your loans while you can. Thank you, Tyler. We'll see you next month. So with that done, we'll turn this meeting back over to Rush Hill, my compadre here on Wake Up Newport, and he's going to introduce our guest speaker today. So Rush, go ahead, take it away.
Well, thank you, Steve. Always glad to step in to try to fix things that you've taken off course. So let me start with an introduction here. We have an incredible speaker today. We've seen him before, Allan Zaremberg. He is the president and chief executive officer of the Cal Chamber. He took over the top staff position there in 1998 after 6 years as executive vice president and head of Cal Chamber's legislative advocacy program. Supporting policies that give job creators the certainty and stability they need to make investments and hiring decisions has been priority for Zaremberg. He's headed statewide ballot campaigns to ensure real estate taxes require 2/3 vote, to close the legal loopholes that permitted shakedown lawsuits, to assure adequate funding for transportation infrastructure, and to oppose anti-business proposals that would have increased the cost of healthcare, electricity, and public works. He's led negotiations culminating in adoption of comprehensive reforms of the state workers' compensation system, endangered species laws, and other key issues. He also guides the Cal Chamber's ongoing effort in the leading employment law expert for California businesses to provide products and services that help employers comply with the continually changing state and federal laws. Before joining the Cal Chamber, Zaremberg served as the chief legislative advisor to and advocate for governors George Deukmejian and Pete Wilson. Zaremberg served as a captain and flight navigator on a KC-135 jet refueling tanker while in the U.S. Air Force from 1970 to 1975. He holds a BS in economics from Penn State University and a JD from the McGeorge Law School, University of the Pacific, where he was a member of the Law Journal. We are very pleased to have Allan with us this morning. And Allan, I turn the program over to you.
Great. Well, good morning, Newport, and thanks for having me. And I have to tell you, Steve, I wish I were there, because there are not many places in the world that are as a great vacation spot as Orange County and Newport Beach. So I'm sorry I'm not there, but I hope to be back there soon. And I think that's one of the things that we all hope to have real soon here is the ability to and travel. I don't have to tell you that the biggest impact of the pandemic is the tourism and travel sector. We've seen the highest unemployment in those particular areas, and that continues to be where we struggle. And like I said, you know that better than I do, because that's certainly a significant part of your economy. But we see it from, and why California has probably had a higher unemployment rate than many parts of the country. People come here instead of going to Iowa or Nebraska or Arkansas, many places like that. And, that's a huge factor. I think one of the other things that's suffered over this, of course, is the inability to have international tourists and the shutdown with Disneyland, obviously, and many of the, it's one of our greatest exports is to be able to have international tourism here, and that's a huge part of our economy that's obviously going to take a while to get back together until people can travel. Where are we in terms of getting things back on track? And I don't think there's any question that the governor is motivated to do that and has started to open up counties. He changed some of the rules so the counties could open up more quickly. And we see that over and over and over again throughout the state, that counties are open for business. It's not full on pre-pandemic, of course. We all know that. But we have a date of June 15th where the governor said he's going to lift the tiers on the various counties that are restrictions on capacity for certain events. That we'll see how that plays out, I think, on June 15th. For example, I have a board meeting scheduled down in Laguna Niguel in September. I haven't had an in-person board meeting like many people since last February or March. And we're hopeful that we can travel down there. I think one of the questions will be, and I think this is a question for you and your business travelers, is how will the companies feel about their executives traveling? Are they comfortable with that? how do they feel about gatherings and meetings and being in conferences? We certainly see the conferences are one of the things that are struggling, and all the hotel rooms and all the catering that goes along with that. So those are the things that I've said, you know better than I, that are going to take a while to get back together. But much of the economy here in California is better than anywhere else in the country. Certainly, we're on Zoom, and the tech sector has exploded here in California, and we see that in terms of revenues for the state of California. The state of California, through all the years where we've had pressure for tax increases, not to say that there aren't special interest groups that still want to raise taxes. We're going to have over 40 when we combine the federal and the state revenue. The federal revenue out of the American Rescue Plan and the state revenue that's in excess of a base budget where we expected it to be, well in excess of probably $40 billion. Now, a lot of that's one-time money. We don't expect that to be ongoing. Certainly the federal money won't be, but the state money could be, and we don't know. A lot of it is capital gains. The stock market is doing great, and that manifests itself in California to a lot of increased revenues. I think so. Next week, probably the governor will unveil his plan to spend all this money, and then the legislature will have a chance to work on that and have to adopt the budget by the beginning of the fiscal year on July 1. Where does that money go? How is that spent? What is the blueprint for California as we go forward? I think many people in the tourism sector would like to see some money dedicated to promoting California as a tourism destination. Those are some of the places where we've also seen struggling that is not just the tourism sector, but certainly those areas where we have people who haven't been able to get their kids in school, don't have adequate broadband. So let's take the Central Valley and a little bit of the Inland Empire. The Central Valley. So let me digress for a second, and well, I'll tell you what. Before I digress, let me because I was going to talk about one of the situations that's on the forefront is our drought and the lack of water that we're going to have here in California, which is not as significant an impact in Southern California this year as it is in Central and Northern California. But before I get into that, let me talk a little bit about the consequences of the pandemic on employers in California and what we're going to see. So, we've had, because of our reliance and the robust tourism sector we have in the hospitality sector, the unemployment rate in California is significantly higher than the rest of the country. And some people would also say it's because we shut down a little more strictly than the rest of the country, which is probably true. Having said that, what has that created for a problem? And that's created a minimum of a $20 billion deficit in our unemployment insurance fund. Probably going to grow to 30 billion because the federal additional benefits are continuing through September, the beginning of September. And obviously, when you apply for the federal benefits, you're going to have to be eligible for California state benefits. I can see the unemployment insurance deficit reaching $30 billion. And who's responsible for paying that off? Historically, the employers have always had to have an assessment on their unemployment insurance, usually for 10 years. That's what happened after the Great Recession. Beginning in 2009, we had to start paying that back. Now, in terms of what's the governor, what are we lobbying for? Will the federal government forgive this $30 billion deficit? And I say, why is the federal government involved? Because in order to keep unemployment insurance benefits flowing, even though we're in deficit, the federal government loans money to California, and that $30 billion is loaned from the federal government. We have to pay it back, unless, of course, they forgive that. I think one of the challenges is many other states have used their federal money to pay down their unemployment insurance deficit. There's only 5 states that have a huge impact like we do New York, Texas, Massachusetts, and there's one more. So it's not like there's all 50 states have a huge deficit that they want the federal government to forgive. Let me talk a little bit, move on to a couple other things and talk about the drought, because I can see drought and wildfires being one of the key factors in the Northern California and Central Valley economy, and probably deals with food prices in the near future. There's clearly not enough water to go around. There has been since the last drought, Southern California has adopted numerous conservation measures and has stored more water. So I think the Metropolitan Water District has done a good job of trying to make sure that the water supplies in Southern California will be adequate for this year. I think for the upcoming year, though, for Central California, there's going to have to be a lot of ag land that's fallowed because there just isn't enough water to go around. And obviously, what's created that situation is not just that we haven't had any rain, it's the temperature climb here. So in Northern California, not only have we not had any rain for the last 2 months, the temperatures are running every day at least 10 degrees above normal. So we get not only a lack of water, but we get a much drier situation. Well, that's a concern, obviously, for wildfires going into I would say, normally we would say into the fall, but I think now with the heat, we're going to see the exposure to wildfires begin here this summer. And the other major issue, and maybe you've seen that today, is reliability of our electrical grid and supply. Last year, if you recall, there was a question of whether or not we were going to run out of electricity when the temperatures reached 110 here in California. We rely more on renewable energy. And of course, when the sun goes down in the fall at 7:30, we can't develop any more energy, and the temperature might be at its highest peak during the day. That's what leads to a shutdown in electric supplies. And what we've seen, the administration here has, as much as they're opposed to fossil fuels, has ensured that we will have an adequate supply by making sure that some gas-fired, what we call peaker power plants, are going to be able to be available later in the summer and the fall to deliver that needed excess electricity. So that's a huge thing. So I recall, in fact, the administration had asked us to we brought in 10 major companies for a meeting with the governor, because there's a concern about electric prices, especially in the manufacturing sector. And we brought in a number of major companies that do business in California. And to a company, each and every one said, reliability, as bad as prices may be, reliability is more important. If we shut down in a day, we lose more revenue than we spend on electricity for the entire year. So those are one of the things that's crucial up and coming. So before I turn it over to questions here, I'd be remiss not to bring up what's what the media wants to cover is the recall of Gavin Newsom. It has not qualified for the ballot yet, but it will most likely qualify by maybe the end of this month. So this is not something that happens immediately when the signatures were turned in. The Secretary of State had to have the counties count the number of signatures. They did that. Then there's like a period of 35 or so days where people have an opportunity to withdraw their signatures and pull them off of the petitions that they sign. That's unlikely to happen. Then after that, there has to be an analysis by some state agencies on what the cost is going to be. And these are all things that if you recall, forget the pun, the recall of Josh Newman, that were intended that the legislature passed to try to slow down the recall Josh, and he was eventually recalled, and then he gained his seat back in a November election. And so there are some barriers here to having the election right away. I think most people think the election, the lieutenant governor, once all the hoops have been jumped through, the lieutenant governor calls the election with a minimum of 60 days to go, giving people a chance to file. Most people think the election's going to be in October or November. How does the polling show? And I guess it depends on whose poll you look at. The Public Policy Institute shows that the governor has a comfortable. When I say the governor, let's put it. So there's two parts to the recall. Let's just review those quickly. It's a ballot measure. So the first is, do you want to recall the governor? And regardless of whether you vote yes or no, you get a chance to vote for the second part of the recall ballot, and that's who would replace the governor if the governor is recalled. So assume for a minute that 80% of the Democrats vote to no on the recall. They still get to vote on who replaces the governor. And in order for the governor to maintain his strategy that this is a Republican power grab, he is trying his best to make sure there aren't any credible Democrats that appear on the ballot that would give a Democrat a reason to vote yes on the recall. So that will happen, and so the Republicans released a poll the other day that showed it at 50-50. Well, I think if you push a little bit and you don't come back on some of the other issues about the economy is opening up, Disneyland is open. I mean, these are things that the governor is encouraging to do to make sure that these happen. There's issues that we see from whether it be the candidates who want to run against the governor, Caitlyn Jenner or John Cox, the issues of shutdown, homelessness, housing prices are things that they're going to present. And of course, the governor is going to try to show that the state is back open, obviously, and which to a great extent, by the time the election comes around in October and November, the state will mostly be open. The economy will be back on track. And I think for the most part, even though right now you'll see the opponents talking about schools not being open, schools will most likely be open in September. So these are things that will drive the people's view of whether or not the governor should be recalled. I will say that the governor defeated John Cox pretty handily in the general election. Is Caitlyn Jenner a credible candidate? I have to say that the media looks for these kinds of things without having a lot of conflict in going on these days in Washington. For example, on KCAL News at 9 last night, they opened up with 5 minutes on Caitlyn Jenner. Is she a credible candidate for governor? Well, obviously they thought so as part of the news story last night. So these are things that are going to drive the media. I think they're looking for, conflict and entertainment. Things are so different than when Arnold Schwarzenegger when Gray Davis was recalled almost 20 years ago and Arnold was elected governor. Arnold had done some political work. He had an after-school initiative that he had worked on a ballot measure before the recall election. He had done his homework, and Gray Davis wasn't as popular as Gavin Newsom is. I will say that when you look at the research, the Republicans who want to vote yes on the recall are more passionate than the Democrats who want to vote no, but it doesn't mean that the Democrats won't vote no. They still will. And so the governor, I would say, notwithstanding most of the polls show him with a good chance to defeat the recall. He's not taking anything for granted, and I expect that the governor will raise, I'm going to say, in excess of $50 million to fight the recall. Do the Republicans have that kind of money? Well, I don't know. John Cox is putting some of his own money in to run ads. And Caitlyn Jenner, is she putting her own money in? That I don't know. What can she afford to do? And then the final candidate that probably polls the best among all the Republicans is the mayor of San Diego, which is Kevin Faulconer, or the former mayor of San Diego, Kevin Faulconer. But will he have the kind of resources it takes? I think right now, obviously, the governor is going to have the resources. He's the governor. He has the ability to raise money, and I think there are some concerns that would a Democrat get in the race? Would it be a Democrat that's would appeal more to the middle of the road voters, or is it a Democrat that's more like a Bernie Sanders or an Elizabeth Warren, and take the opportunity to take the party further to the left? So that's sort of where things stand on the recall, and I'm happy to answer any questions, however you want to go into those, and you want to ask me if Rush is going to ask them, and we'll just go from there.
Well, I think we'll
Well,
tag team you on it.
I'll
So-
lead off with a question, a little bit different topic, but we all hear about how the legislature is often anti-business. Are there any pieces of legislation that stick out at the moment that are damaging to business, that are either in process or being talked about being presented once again?
Actually, Rush, that's a great question, really, to put it in perspective. I think the legislature, as we see them, is just going about business as usual. Without the impact of, there's a pandemic and there's a huge unemployment rate. They're doing their normal things. So, for example, to your point, for small business especially, a few years ago there was a mandatory sick leave requirement of 3 days. Now that same author wants to come back and expand it to at least 5 days. Those are things that impact small business obviously dramatically, and we see legislation for tax increases. It's hard to believe that somebody would propose a tax increase when the state's going to have $40 billion in excess of their baseline budget. But there are people that are pushing those, and we're going to see that. People who, whether they want to raise the income tax rates, or people who want to change the corporate tax on what's called unitary taxing, how you tax your offshore revenues. There are a lot of proposals to do that. I see a lot of areas in the labor law. I think one of the ones we saw that impacts some of your businesses in Orange County, they're in the hospitality industry, that we saw the governor sign, even though we got him to veto it last year, the main requirement that you have to recall your former employees before you hire anybody else if you're in the hospitality and tourism business. Now, I talk to people, and I'm sure you do. Well, the first people we call are the people that used to work for us. Part of it is the legislature said you have to wait 5 days before you can hire somebody else. So, if you have an event coming up, these are things that people don't understand business. So yes, there are some bad bills. We identified 25 different job killers this year. These are the worst of the worst that have an impact on business. 10 of them have been amended, so we're still seeing about 15. But these employment laws that affect small business are really things that that we need to pull everybody together and make sure that the legislature understands. We need to recover. We can't put additional burdens on people who are in a position that need to have some flexibility. So yes, Rush, and I'm happy to send this to Steve, I don't have it in front of me, a list of all 25 job killers that you can share with your members. These are the worst of the worst, but a lot of them deal with the issues centered around employment laws that are pushed by the labor unions to try to increase their membership and show that they're doing something for their members as to why they charge them dues. So yes, we are seeing some employment laws. We're going to see the legislature just doing business as usual. And so our job is, notwithstanding all these other things to get the economy open, we still have to fight the legislature on some of these bad ideas. So it's a very good question, Rush. And so that they're not walking away from this. Now, let me say that one of the other issues, and so where does this go? And so maybe you've seen some of this about housing. One of the things about housing, in order to be able to increase the supply of housing. So what happens here in California is that some of the building trades will, when there's a housing project proposed, that they will say, we would like to have part of that at a rate higher, maybe not a prevailing wage, but certainly higher than a minimum wage, and try to work out an arrangement with the builder before you're able to develop that. And if your money gets stuck not being able to develop that property for a number of years, it takes the ability to make a profit on that. And this is their leverage. There are some builders, so to speak to that, there are some builders that would like to see a proposal that would deal with that would say, we're willing to pay what might be called a residential wage rate, something between higher than the minimum wage and less than the prevailing wage for residential construction. And in return, that C.E.O, the barrier that the unions use to delay projects would be expedited. We would eliminate the ability to use that as a tool just to hold up projects. And so that's one of the things that some builders would favor. Other builders are less in favor of that, but as a way to work something out and say the unions have a lot of influence in the legislature. Can we work with them to find a solution that would expedite the construction of houses and increase the housing supply? So it's I can, like I said, I can get you a more detailed list. I don't have it in front of me on some of all the really onerous legislation, but they really impact, as you can well imagine, small business more than anybody else.
Yeah, I get the Cal Chamber emails, and you guys are definitely on it when it comes to those job killer bills. I already got a text from one of our former mayors and a councilwoman, Diane Dixon, requesting that. So if you would please send it, or have your assistant send any of the list afterwards, that would be great. I've got a question that is a little bit more of a national scope. So we've had the American Rescue Plan pass, $1.9 trillion or so, or maybe more, who knows how much it was. And now they're talking about the infrastructure plan, which is, I guess, partly what we would call traditional infrastructure, and then the rest of it is more social infrastructure. And so does the Cal Chamber have a position on that? Or, I mean, are you supportive of what the president is proposing, or 50-50 on it? How do you guys come down on it?
Sure. Thanks, Steve. So we're working mostly with through the U.S. Chamber. We have a regular call with them. And they are, as you pointed out, they're trying to divide up two things. The issue is, what is the scope of the plan? There's, I think, where you talk about infrastructure that Speaker Pelosi talks about as human infrastructure when she says we're going to put $400 billion into developing job training for people who are in the in-home supportive services industry. That comes from SEIU. That's not what you would call traditional infrastructure, Steve. And I think that's where the U.S. Chamber is trying to draw the line to say, yes, we want infrastructure. We need to put money and resources into that. And then the second thing is, how do you pay for that? So if we can get the plan down to a reasonable amount of money, it's focused on hard infrastructure as we know it. How do you pay for that? And that's the second aspect of it, is that the tax increases that the president is proposing have a double whammy, because not only are they raising corporate taxes, but they also want to raise taxes on individuals that impact California more than any other state in the country. And so when you say, and California was already impacted dramatically, as we know, by what we call the inability to deduct your state and local taxes off your federal taxes, which caused a huge increase on taxes in Californians, because that's just what the cost of living is so much higher here. Is that when the president says, well, I'm not going to raise any taxes on anybody who doesn't make $400,000. Well, who does that impact? Does that impact the people, as I said, in Arkansas and Mississippi and Louisiana and Iowa? No, it impacts the people in California, the people who live along the coast. So we see a double whammy. And with working with the U.S. Chamber, we're trying to work with them to make sure that on infrastructure, that it's a broad-based. If there's revenue that needs to be raised, it's broad-based, or it's pay as you go. So in other words, if you're going to put some money into sewage treatment, do we have a pay as you go situation where the people who benefit from that, actually this is treated as an upfront loan, and then you start to reimburse the government for doing that. I think, when Steve, your question about us lobbying directly, part of the problem is that the way Congress is, I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, is there are no independents in Congress, really. Maybe Manchin from West Virginia, who is holding the line on the filibuster, but there are very few people in Congress, especially the House of Representatives, that won't vote the party line. So if Nancy Pelosi tells them to vote for this infrastructure package, there's very little that we can do with our California delegation to get them to go against that. So what we have to rely on is the lobbying, not just from the U.S. Chamber, from other states that have a role in the U.S. Senate to be able to stop some of these huge tax increases and to narrow down the infrastructure to what we know as traditional infrastructure. So I'm just going to give you a good example. Obviously, the size of Orange County is almost 4 million people. I always talk about, when I just give you a good example, when I speak in the Fresno, the population from Stockton to Bakersfield. So this is not the highest population part of California, is 4 million people. That would make it around the 24th largest state in the country. That's hard to believe that the Central Valley would fall into that category. But all these other 26 states, they all have 2 U.S. senators. Whether you don't have your own U.S. senator, the Central Valley doesn't have their own U.S. senator. So that's where we have to rely on some of these other states to be able to narrow this package down to something that's realistic infrastructure. And also, how do you pay for it?
Okay. I'll remind our guests that if you do have a question, please put it in the Q&A box. If you don't have something, Rush, I'd like to ask, go back to the coronavirus COVID thing. So the hot discussion now in Orange County, and I know it is statewide, is vaccination passports, yes or no?
Okay, so that was going to be part of my pitch before I get into the passport. Let me just say, I'm going to make a pitch to all of you and for all your, all your customers, all your employees. The key out of this problem is vaccinations. There is no other solution other than vaccinations. And one of the reasons California is doing better than the rest of the country is certainly in parts of California, there is, like the Bay Area, there is very little vaccine hesitancy, but there are numerous other parts of California where there is a hesitancy to take the vaccine. We need a program to increase that. And so the next question, so that's one. I mean, we can see when Europe, who did a really lousy job, the European Union, of managing the vaccine supply, They were shut down when we were opening up because they didn't have enough vaccines, where we did have plenty of vaccines. So you can see the huge difference in what happens in the infection rate when people get vaccinated. So, okay, I'll get off that soapbox, and now we'll go into vaccination passports. And should we be required to do that? I think we're going to see, if you want to expand your business, if you want to get in that situation, you can clearly improve. And so this goes back and forth. You can clearly improve the safety of your customers if you say, at Staples Center, we're going to require you to be vaccinated before you come to the playoff games. That serves the public well. They'll feel more confident about going. On the other hand, not everybody's going to get vaccinated. Some people have medical issues. Are you going to have a note from the doctor to say, I can't get vaccinated, I have an autoimmune disorder? So I think there are some pitfalls with government mandating the vaccine. I think it's really going to be more of where the private sector, based on the awareness of their customers and whether or not they want to require that vaccine proof. We see that in some of the sports arenas, you do one of two things. You either show your vaccination, or you show proof positive of that you tested negative within 48 hours. So if you want to go to a San Francisco Warriors game in the Bay Area, they actually send you a test kit if you can't do the vaccine. So having said all that, I think the most important thing, though, is to be able to have an electronically valid vaccine proof, so that when a business says, we need to have proof of your safety for our fellow customers, for our fellow participants, you can show you that you've been vaccinated. And I think we saw, you didn't see, I don't know what's going on down there, but they arrested somebody here for selling fake vaccine cards, counterfeit vaccine. They actually arrested the person for selling counterfeit vaccine cards here in Northern California the other day. So it's ripe for abuse. It helps spread the infections if people are going to show proof of a vaccine when they aren't. And so I think, Steve, the important aspect of this is if the government can play a role, or private sector in the tech sector can play a role, how do we develop something that is foolproof, that is reliable, that you as a business can rely on and say, I'm going to make sure my customers are vaccinated, and so they all feel safe, and I can increase my capacity, I can increase the people that want to come to my restaurant or my sporting event or my movie theater, because I know and they know, and the person sitting next to them knows they've all been vaccinated. So I think that's what we need to have, is a foolproof mechanism to prove that everybody feels safe, knowing that if that's the rule, you're not violating the rule.
Yeah, certainly the devil will be in the details. I mean, when they started vaccinations down here in Orange County, we had the Athena system, and I don't think that was a statewide system. It was just something developed
Right.
for Orange County. I got my vaccinations done through Athena. I don't know about Rush, and so, yeah, if I go on my phone now, I can go to the Athena app and I can show someone that I was fully vaccinated. But my wife, for instance, she went and got vaccinated at a CVS drugstore for her 2 shots. They're not in the Athena system, and they don't have, that kind of thing. And then there's some people that, I went to my doctor's office, and then I went to, Anaheim Stadium, and they went to 2 different places. I think corralling all this data, I think that, if we did want to have vaccine passports, that's going to be the difficulty, is trying to get everybody on one system when we've already launched down 10 different paths here for getting vaccinations, which is good. I mean, it makes it accessible to people. I think we're more likely to get more people vaccinated the more opportunities you get or have to have a shot. But certainly, I think that that's to go back now and put these people back into the system. It's almost like the genie's out of the bottle, and unfortunately,
Yeah,
they plan for that.
I think that's where the technology can come in, and I think we have the ability to do that. One of the other the other consequence here is, or the other factor is HIPAA, to make sure that we protect people's health under HIPAA, their health information, and can we do that? But I think this is important for business. This isn't just the government controlling how people deal in the pandemic. I think there's a lot of business owners out there, a lot of sporting events want to show people you can feel safe if you come to my event. And I think you're absolutely right. For you to be able to have a valid proof of vaccine, as opposed to a card that could have been counterfeited, is really important for the business owner to be able to have something to rely on.
Okay.
I have a personal question to ask you.
Yeah.
During the early 70s, you were very active in flying the KC-135 refueling jets. And did by any chance during that period of time you run into a pilot doing the same by the name of David Ray?
Well, it's, Rush, it's entirely possible, but I don't remember him, and it's entirely possible. What we worked on, one of the things that I got to do frankly, it was just about all the time I did, was refueled the SR-71 spy plane. So wherever the spy plane went, we went. So whether or not that was over Southeast Asia, or whether or not that was during the Mideast War, to be able to show where the tanks were, and we traveled with the SR-71. So the name is a little familiar, but I can't place them right now. So it's possible.
All right, thank you.
Did you want to field some of the questions in the Q&A there? I think we have a few now.
Sure.
Rush.
Let's see, I guess we have 3 that have popped in here.
While you're reviewing that, let me just ask another quick question. Go back to the recall. So I find as a chamber, and in talking with other chamber presidents, there's always the question of how how far do you stick your neck out when it comes to politics? Because, and especially these days with things being so polarized, that you're bound to piss off half the people, no matter what position you take, and maybe piss off everybody if you don't take a position at all. But does Cal Chamber take positions on races, and will they be taking a position on the recall?
The recall, okay, so is as I said, a ballot measure. So for the chamber to take a position on a ballot measure, it's up to our board of directors. And give me 2 seconds here. I'm just gonna okay, so I just had some noise in the background. It'll be up to our board of directors. At the September board meeting, it will probably be a discussion. So just to give you for the first time, so back in 2003, when Gray Davis was being recalled, we did not take a position on the recall, if it helps to put it in perspective, but we did take a position on who you should vote for if Gray Davis were recalled. And we were actually in Orange County. I can remember this clear as day. And Arnold Schwarzenegger came down and made a speech to our board of directors when we had a meeting in September of 2003, just before the recall. And it was carried live on CNN, and it gave him some credibility. And because the lieutenant governor at the time, Cruz Bustamante, did not do what Gray Davis wanted him to do, which was Gray Davis didn't want a credible Democrat running, just like Gavin Newsom doesn't. Cruz Bustamante threw his hat in the ring And 2 weeks before our board meeting, Cruz Bustamante came out with a 14-point tax plan to tax businesses, really burdensome taxes on businesses. So our board made a choice at that time that we won't support the recall, but if he does get recalled, we will support Arnold Schwarzenegger as the person that we want people to vote for. And that was the first and only time in a gubernatorial race that the chamber did endorse a candidate. We get involved in a lot of legislative races throughout the state, trying to get pro-business members elected. But that was the first and only time we ever got involved in a governor's race. And where will we be in September? I have no idea. I suspect that many people will, well, I don't know. I'm not going to say one way or the other, whether or not they're expect great Gavin Newsom to prevail and defeat the recall and want to be supportive of that, or whether or not they find themselves in a position of having to choose who the best alternative is if he does get recalled. So we have a ways to go, a lot of research to do. And as I said, October at the earliest, maybe even November. There's a lot that can change in politics in the next 5 months. And this certainly has a long way to go. And whether or not, I think most importantly for people to keep an eye on is, will somebody come in with a substantial amount of money to support the recall? So let me put that in perspective in terms of Republicans. If you're a national Republican and you're interested in where do I put my money, and I'm very supportive, I suspect, and what I hear is, I'm not going to put it into this recall. I'm not going to come into the situation where it's likely that a Democrat may win again in November 2022, even if you recall him. My goal is to win back the House and the US Senate in 2022, and we're going to put our resources as wealthy Republicans into those campaigns. And so I think when you look for, it would take an individual who probably wants to run as an alternative if the recall passes, that would be willing to do that. And I just don't see this as a national priority for where Republicans would put their resources as opposed to the House and Senate races.
We do have a question that's actually more of a statement from former Mayor Diane Dixon. She says, President Biden made an important statement last week in one of his speeches promoting his infrastructure proposal that did not receive much media attention. That capitalism has failed to meet the need of the middle class, and the government must have a bigger role in supporting people's lives. Chambers of commerce organizations in every city should be challenging this statement. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, this is a reflection, I think, of, and I appreciate that comment. This is a reflection, I think, of what we see nationally that has certainly manifested itself here in California, where and I don't think this is a surprise to anybody, that the Democrat Party is moving to, you can say for common sense, moving to the left, to the proposals that we've seen from the people that want government to do more and the private sector to do less. And this is what we have to fight both at the state level and the national level. So let me give you a good example, and I think this is a very telling of what we have to deal with here. So our new U.S. Senator Alex Padilla, who took Kamala Harris's place, was appointed by Gavin Newsom. When he was in the legislature, which he was, and he was part of the LA City Council, he was very balanced in the legislature. He had a decent voting record with the business community, would carry legislation that would be balanced and help the business community. But we have seen him since he got in the U.S. Senate to actually adopt some policies that are that are inconsistent with his history. And why is he probably doing that? He's probably doing that to avoid a challenge from, I'll say, from the left. Those are convenient terms, but from the left when he runs for re-election in 2022. For election, he hasn't been elected to this position yet. He was appointed. So I think that's a very good question, and I think, but it's a broader question than just we see from the president, who I think has, and I think to her point, has taken positions that are less pro-business than his history when he was in the U.S. Senate, less bipartisan than his history when he was in the U.S. Senate, and I see this as a reflection of how things are manifesting themselves. And I think it's an excellent question, and we have to stand up and fight for that. I will say this, though, that I don't think you see, when it comes to managing things, and this is going to be, I think, President Biden's challenge, notwithstanding the fact that even in states where Democrats are in charge, you can't be, it's easy to have a strategy of Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren when you're just the US Senator, when you don't have to manage anything, when you don't have to make the economy work in your state. And we see where people who are the governors and they're managing things, they're not as extreme as what we see out of the US Senate and out of Congress. And we have to guard against that here in California too, to make sure that doing what's right comes first without regard to the politics.
There are two other comments that, if I were to summarize them, that basically relate to the fact that it seems that everything that's happening is a retraction of our freedoms that this country has been founded upon. That we see all of these freedoms being eroded, whether it be by the virus and the emergency powers that were granted, or the general actions of the Senate and Congress in Washington.
I appreciate, I saw those and I appreciate those. And I think they're a reflection of, let business people do their job. Obviously there are certain things that, there's certain roles for the government, but, if we let business people do their job and create wealth. And I think one of the saddest parts about all this commentary rush is that whether it be in California or at the national level, wealth creation is a four-letter word. They want to punish people who create wealth. The left wants to punish people who create wealth. They want to take it away from them. They want to tax them. We really need to guard against that, because that is what drives our economy. That is what creates opportunity, and that's what creates the jobs. So both throughout the state of California at the national level, we need to make sure that people understand that creating wealth and jobs is a good thing, not something that should be punished.
Well, Allan, we certainly want to thank you for your time, and we're glad to capture you this morning and get an update as to what's going on from the Sacramento level and insight from the Washington, D.C. as well. And we do appreciate your efforts and the efforts of the California Chamber and our relationship that we have. And we're glad to help you any way we can down here. So Steve, do you have any further comments as well?
Yeah, I'd also just like to thank Allan for visiting with us this morning. Hopefully next time we have him, he can visit us in person here in Newport Beach, as he would prefer as well, I think. And
so there's Steve, when I get invitations, I don't always look at them and say I can do that, but when you invite me, it's, I love coming down there, and I love to meet the people that create the jobs down there in Orange County. So thank you.
We appreciate that. I'll just also mention that 2 weeks from today, on May 20th, we'll be having our new supervisor, Katrina Foley, who was formerly the mayor of Costa Mesa, who was elected to fill Michelle Steele's seat after she was elected to Congress. And she'll be with us with our Government Affairs Committee meeting on May 20th at 8 a.m. as well. And then next month for Wake Up Newport, we'll be having Orange County District Attorney Todd Spitzer as our speaker. So we look forward to that as well, see what's happening over there in the DA's office. And with that being said, I'll just say that I hope that we'll be meeting in person soon. We're just waiting for the library to give us the go-ahead. Normally we meet in the Friends Room at the library. The city's been reopening, and as Allan alluded to earlier, June 15th is a big date where a lot of restrictions will be lifted, hopefully by the governor and the blueprint for a safer economy and all that goes with it. So hopefully we'll be back meeting in person. If not in June, then hopefully definitely by July. And we look forward to receiving you all there. And sort of getting a little bit back to normal. I don't think everything is going to be 100%. And I think we'll probably still have a few restrictions. I can't imagine that everything's going to go away on June 15th. Masking and maybe some social distancing and things like that. Maybe larger venues will still have a few restrictions, but hopefully, at least as far as our local level goes, we'll be able to get back to doing what we do best and meeting, networking, and enjoying each other's company. So with that being said, thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you soon in the future. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Rush. Thanks, Steve. Great.
You bet.